Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 1 through 11. Hi, I'm Jesus. You remember me from last Sunday, and if you don't, that's okay. This story's even better. So, in this story, there is a crowd and a donkey and characters, more characters. But I'm only sheltering in place with two other family members. So I'm gonna have a little help from my friends. This is disciple 1. This is disciple 2. And this is Jesus. I hope you enjoy today's Bible story.
Oh, this is such a long walk. I hope we're getting close. Hey, Jesus, where are we going?
Well, our map says that we're getting close to Bethany. We want to get to Jerusalem, which is only a bit farther past Bethany.
Oh, yeah. I see the Mount of Olives. You're right. We're almost to Bethany. Whew. Anybody have more water?
Yep, just a bit, but you can finish it if we are getting close to Jerusalem.
All right, guys. Once you have had a drink, I need you to run ahead and do a favor for me.
Anything, Jesus. You know we'd do anything for you.
When you get to the village, search high and low for the donkey, but not just any donkey. I need a special donkey, a donkey that has never been ridden before.
Never been ridden before? This ought to be interesting. What do we do when we find the donkey?
Untie the donkey and bring it to me as quickly as you can.
Okay, but what if someone asks us why we are running off with their donkey?
Just say, the Lord needs him.
Really? Just say the Lord needs him? We won't get in trouble?
Trust me, it'll work.
Well, okay, Jesus, if you say so. Can you believe it? The Messiah riding into Jerusalem on a humble donkey? Don't they know they're going to look ridiculous?
I know. Why not a great chariot? Or at least a proper horse?
Maybe they're making a point.
Huh. Yeah. That would be just like Jesus. Always making some point. Ooh. Now that you mention it, I think I read about this somewhere in the Hebrew Bible. That the king would ride in on a donkey.
But where are we going to find a donkey that's never been ridden before?
We'll just have to look around. Let's ask these folks if they've seen one. Excuse me? Does anyone know who has a donkey that has never been ridden?
Yes, there's a young one right here.
Thank you.
Quick, let's bring him back to Jesus.
Hey, what are you doing? That donkey doesn't belong to you. Where are you going?
The Lord needs him.
Jesus, mission accomplished. We got a donkey that has never been ridden, just like you wanted.
Oh, thanks, guys. This donkey is perfect.
Jerusalem, here we come.
Hosanna! Hosanna! Blessed are they who come. Hosanna! The King in God's name.
Hosanna! All's well in heaven.
Hosanna!
Glory in the high places.
Hosanna! Do you hear that? Wow, look at all these people. It's like they've come for a parade.
Teacher, get your people under control. Make them stop shouting. This is a well-mannered city. Keep them under control.
It wouldn't matter if I told my disciples or the crowd to be quiet. The rocks on the road would make noise for them. the rocks themselves would shout praise to God.
Hi everyone, happy Palm Sunday. Will you pray with me, please? Holy One, sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need to lean on one another's faith for a little while, on one another's love and hope and trust. And so, will you help us borrow your love and your hope for a little space this morning, that we might open up this story anew and be made new ourselves. Amen. About 7 years ago, I was living in Des Moines, Iowa, where I had recently moved for my first ever ministry job. I was new in town and it was my birthday. And so I decided to make myself a birthday cake, kind of on a whim. But when I went to open the sugar jar, I scraped the bottom. I was a whole cup of sugar short and I very nearly just gave up. I mean, it like a tree falling in the forest. If a celebration that only you care about doesn't happen, does anybody really hear it disappear? I almost just gave up. But then, even though it felt a little too cliche to be true, I sucked it up, I embraced the awkwardness, and I knocked on my neighbor's door to ask to borrow a cup of sugar. It seems like an easy thing to do, but I don't know, in this day and age when many of us are living in new cities, new places, we may not know our neighbors, even though, of course, one of the central calls of our faith is to love our neighbors, to love them not just with our abundance, but with our vulnerabilities, our needs as well. So I borrowed the cup of sugar, and the cake was delicious. Borrow is a funny word in a situation like that. We borrow a cup of sugar, but no one's really under the illusion that we'll be returning it, at least not in an obvious quid pro quo situation. It's kind of like asking to borrow a tissue or a moment of someone's time. It's a gift disguised as a transaction. Borrowing is a kind of thick relationship. It's a gift exchange in a way. It puts you into deepened relationship with someone else. It puts you in debt to them, in a place of humility and interconnectedness. Cultural anthropologists distinguish between circular giving and reciprocal giving. Reciprocal means like that I would expect to lend my neighbor sugar, versus a circular giving, which would be that the both of us, through that exchange of generosity, of abundance, we're somehow knit more deeply into the neighborhood itself, more likely to turn to others when we need help, even in some kind of small way or in a larger way. Reading the Palm Sunday story this week, I just, for whatever reason, kept coming back to the donkey. Every time I read the story, I was obsessed with this donkey. Or is it a colt or a horse? In the Matthew version, actually, if you read closely, they think it's a colt and a horse. It's fascinating. It's a little different in every gospel account, but all four gospels mention and feature the donkey. He is the sort of second star of the story. And I always remember in our palm parades at church, the kids always seem to be obsessed with the donkey. They're like, Jesus, sure, he's a little tall up there, a little scary. They're really into the donkey. And I kept coming back to this donkey, this borrowed donkey. All four accounts of the Gospels mention the colt, the horse, the donkey, but just one, the Mark version, specifically says that Jesus is just borrowing him. It specifically says, and we will immediately return him. So what's going on here? I kept coming back to the donkey. And a special shout out to Terry and Dorothy for rocking the donkey again this year. These puppets, these magnificent puppets, feel a little bit like borrowing from our own recent past as a congregation. They were made nearly 20 years ago by former Associate Minister Adam Blons, who now works with one of my best friends from seminary in St. Paul, Minneapolis in Minnesota. But anyway, so I kept coming back to the donkey, and I love this detail that he's borrowed for the moment, for this moment of political theater or street protest. He's mooched this donkey. And Jesus says to these two disciples in at least two of the gospel accounts, he says, go ahead, find this donkey. And he anticipates the resistance. Jesus says, it's going to be awkward. They're going to say, what are you doing? Kind of like go knocking up on your neighbor's door who you've never actually met and asking for some sugar, or asking for someone to pray for your sick brother, or asking a neighbor for a ride to your vaccination appointment, or whatever it is that you might need. Jesus says it might feel awkward to admit you need help, to admit you need something that somebody else has. They will say, what are you doing? But Jesus says really straightforward, you don't have to lie or make up an excuse. Just share your need. Just state it plainly without apology or fancy explanation. Just say, the Lord needs it. And in at least one account, he says, and assure them that they will get it back, And we don't know if they really return the donkey. We don't hear that part of the story, whether it's truly borrowed in a reciprocal sense, or perhaps it's more of the circular giving, that those folks who contributed the donkey to the story maybe got back more than they knew in some way. My friends who are not part of a faith community are often amazed at all of the hand-me-downs that my daughters wear from church friends. And I think at our best, we in our church and in faith communities, we're well practiced at the art of borrowing, lending, passing along, holding things in common, having a sense that things are ours just for a little while and that they have more life when we can lend them easily to one another and then be knit together in thick relationship, in positions of humility. Beloved, I think that it's not an accident or just a fun literary flourish that Jesus rides into Jerusalem, rides into Holy Week, rides into his wedding with his fate on something borrowed, on a borrowed donkey, in this position of humility and indebtedness to his neighbors, to strangers. He enters Holy Week on a borrowed donkey, and he enters into a week of borrowed time. And beloved, this year has in many ways felt like a bit like living on borrowed time, in the sense of death's proximity, coming close, and in that sense that is always true as mortal beings, that our entire existence is in some sense borrowed time, that we are not our own ultimately. We belong to God, and so we belong to one another because we belong to God. This week that Jesus enters, this Holy Week, is the week that the disciples will have to reckon with the reality that their teacher, Jesus, they only really had him on loan temporarily. And yet, we are called as Jesus' disciples in the present day to continue to borrow from one another, to borrow faith and strength when we need it from someone else, and to lend it generously when we feel like we have a little more to give. We are called, knit together in community, to borrow one another's sorrows and to borrow one another's joys, to lean on one another. Next Sunday, we will remember the promise that is coming at the end of Holy Week, that even death only ultimately borrows people from us. And in the fullness of God's glory, we will be returned, just as that donkey Jesus promised will come back to you. And so will you pray with me one more time? Loving God, we thank you for the gifts that you keep giving us. Help us ride into this Holy Week in a position of humility, knowing that we are knit together. Amen.